Hello everyone, my name is Chris Gates, otherwise known as Iron Horse. I've been asked to make a simple cinematic editor tutorial. There are a lot of things that we can get into, many different aspects of the cinematic editor, the little quirks, little special rules, some advanced stuff, but initially I think I would just like to go over some of the more basic stuff. Let me kill Discord real quick so that's not interfering. So let's see here, where to start. I recommend whenever you work with the cinematic editor to always click on an actual file. Make sure that you're on obviously the live branch. You can be on the beta and it'll ask you for the actual launch pad. Don't do it from there. Just go ahead and click on any cinematic file. If you need, it'll just open up a blank cinematic file. It won't actually open up the file, you double click. If you need to, you can always navigate to the actual install folder, which here's actually an easier way to do that. To go ahead and right click in NS2, go ahead and go to local files, and you should click on browse, and that'll bring you up to here. From here you can go ahead and just click on the x64 folder, and there's a cinematic editor. That's the best way to run it if you're not going to click an individual file or if you don't have that file associated just yet. So you're in a cinematic editor now. Now everything's going to look a little weird. It may look different from how you open it. This was set up this way for myself, all these window panes, for another project, another purpose I was doing. I don't normally use it like this. So first I'm just going to take a quick second to show you how to orientate the workspace, especially if you're on a single monitor. If you have a dual monitor, I highly recommend having the curves list separate. So what I would usually do is have the curves list have its own separate thing and then move it over to another window, for instance, another monitor. But in the case that you can't do that, I'm going to just show you what to do without that. So you'll notice I only have one window right now. I'm going to click on Window, Preview, and you can see it's enlarged. I'm just going to drag and drop it, place it down here. Now we oftentimes want the preview window, which is actually like what you're actually going to see in game. It's more similar to the rendered version. You're going to have better lighting, and yeah, that's just kind of the final touch. It's also where the camera goes, but we're always going to keep that down below and kind of out of the way, precisely because of when you do add cameras, if you ever do add cameras, if you so much as move around in that view, it will change your camera for whatever keyframe you're on. And it can be kind of difficult to chase down that problem sometimes and delete and undo that mistake, so to speak. So curves list is going to be a huge part of what you do in the cinematic editor, so I definitely recommend having it front and center. Give yourself a little bit of space here. So this is the typical setup that I utilize. I also don't need this window as much. I usually will pull it down. I'll show you how to do this in a second. So for now, we're going to go ahead and open up. Let's see. What do I want to open? What do I want to open? Let's open... let's go to the tram. So this is just a menu background that I'm doing right now, just to update essentially the tram cinematic, because it's old and it's actually using a part of the map that is from alpha days. So here you can see I already have a camera in the scene because this is again going to be for a menu background, so I need a camera to actually place into the scene, and that's what you're going to see when you actually launch the game. You won't need this for like effects and stuff like that, but it's useful if you actually want to make a quote-unquote cinematic and not just an effects. So let's back up here. What you're actually seeing is a level file, but it's a cut down level file. It's not the entirety of tram, you'll notice. Things are cut out. That means it's an actual custom made level file, so I had a mapper actually just cut this up for me, meaning it's the map you'd expect, except, well, the things that aren't really in view are cut out for performance reasons, so the map actually loads a lot faster. But everything else, like lights and whatnot, atmospherics, they're all in there still. A lot of the props are in there. So the way that you would actually do this from scratch is, and you'll notice right now everything goes black. Don't be alarmed if what you do goes black, especially if you're opening up an existing file. A lot of times wherever you save your file is wherever you're actually looking. So if I put my face into this right here, it's going to remember where that is the next time I open the file. So go ahead and right click to hold down, and then you can actually move your mouse to look around. WASD can move back and forth. And a lot of you right now are wondering why it's jet black on screen, even though there was a level. It's because I just cleared the level. In certain cases where you know you have a level for a background or some sort of environment, go ahead and click the top left of either window. It could be the preview window, or in this case we like to work mostly in the editor window, so we're just going to left click up here. We have textured lit, and textured unlit. Ta-da! Here's all these little props that I've added to the scene that you can notice. Now, you're going to wonder where the hell the map went, so let me go back to that. You're going to click on Scene, Set Level. It's going to open up the file system, which is just the directory within NS2 itself, right? So this is just basically Steam Apps, Common, Natural Selection 2, NS2. And then from underneath that NS2 folder, you'll recognize Cinematics folder and Maps and everything else. Well, you're going to go to Maps. And you're not going to have as many maps as I'm going to have, because I have a lot of custom maps, and I have, what I call reference maps, which is if I'm going to make something, map cinematic or some sort of cinematic for effects or something, then I want to have like a reference level to match it to. Let me see if I can give you a quick example of what that would look like. So here's a reference layout for lava falls. So this is just a little small cutout, just some props that was made from me for doing the new lava cinematics for Refinery, for instance. This allowed me to actually place things in here and see what it looked like against the props for scaling purposes. I also added like a marine model as well to get scale. You'll notice here though, you could probably hopefully see it, but there's the actual origin point. Where you make your level file that you're going to be opening, where that origin point is crucial for a lot of reasons. But you'll notice it's placed right here. I asked for it to be placed roughly there because I wanted to be able to offset it just slightly from the origin point so these level effects would come out of here. So that's basically how you add a little scene. In this particular case, like I said, I had a custom level made. So I'm going to click on Scene, clear that level, Scene, Set Level, go back to Maps, and I'm going to open up, in this case, the tram menu map that was made for me. If I could remember what it's called. Sometimes I'm smart and do menu underscore metro, but what did I do with it? Well, now here's the embarrassing part. There's the tram, but not the tram menu file. Okay, so in this case, I think I know what I did. Maps. Once you're actually in the Maps folder, you'll have a Menus folder. From there, you can have all of the actual, yeah, there it is, that's why. You can see I made it back up at the original. So in this particular case, because it's a menu background that I made, it belongs in a different folder structure, not just the default maps, but maps menus. So in this case, that's where my level file is for this particular scene. Ta-da! And we're all back now. Back to where I originally had it. So you're going to ask, again, why does everything look different from last time? And again, that's because I clicked the top left up here with the left mouse button. Oh, there it is. Took a second. Come on. I swear I'm clicking. There we go. Textured lit. Now it's back to how we had it. Working in unlit mode is very useful in a lot of circumstances, especially if you're working in poor lighting. You sometimes just want to have unlit. So it's by needs basis, so to speak. So. Alright, so you'll notice though that the preview pane still just as it was before. And again, I'm going to show you by right-clicking right now, and when I right-click, you're going to notice this history tab over here, which keeps track of what I've done. You can notice it says clear level, set level, etc. If I were to move around, just right-click, holding right-click to look around, and then WASD like I would in the editor pane, if I do that down here in the preview pane, it now says adjust camera. I don't want that, because now I've just adjusted the actual camera in the scene. I had that just where I wanted it. So as an example of how to undo something, go to that history tab on the right there and click on one above it, the set level. So this is why you don't really want to work in the preview pane. It's good to see how things look. Don't get used to working in it though. You really ideally want to work in the editor window for a lot of reasons, not just cameras. But obviously tools like this, little widgets and whatnot, that are going to help you. You don't get that in the preview pane. So I'm going over basics here. Some of the stuff a lot of you might already know, but I've been asked to at least start with something. And so we're starting with the basics today. Maybe you'll find stuff you didn't know. Okay, so you'll notice when I clicked on this thing down here, the curves window. By the way, at any point, if any window is missing, like let's say for instance I go ahead and drag this out and close it, and you're like, where's my curves window? Or where's my history window that he's talking about? Click on the window button up top, click on that particular thing, curves. And I just noticed something while I was doing that. Oh yeah, now we're going to fight. Now we're going to fight for window space. I love this part. This is always fun. There we go. Okay. So, one thing I don't have open, you'll notice, is output. output window is useful if you're going to run into some errors. So if you're going to have output open, like if something's not working right, open up the output window to look at it. But I do recommend keeping it at the very bottom, as it's just a printout, a log. So everything here, loading viewport coordinates, all this is doing is actually loading up that camera position I talked about. In this particular instance, it's not talking about the actual camera in the scene that renders for the menu level. It's actually talking about this camera. So for instance, if I were to come over here, I'm going to mess everything up by doing this, I'm pretty sure. We're going to go back to select object. There we go. And don't mind me 1 second, I'm just doing something because I'm actually modifying an actual file that I'm going to be using later, and I don't want to screw myself up. So probably shouldn't be working in an actual project. I should be starting fresh, but for the time being, this is a good example case. So let's say, for instance, I'm going to put my face right here in the robotics factory. I'm going to click File, Save. I'm going to close down that editor. When I open up that editor again, it's just going to open up nice and fresh here. Nothing's there, no file. Click on File, Recent Files, and you'll see the stuff that you've been working on. Otherwise, click Open and navigate to your hopefully working folder. Hopefully you have a working folder outside of the actual, maybe something on your desktop, something far away from the actual file system of the actual game. You will have to eventually point to stuff in the file system of the game, as you saw me pointing to a map and stuff like that. So you will have to work out of the existing directories. But hopefully your main cinematic and a lot of your assets, you have a folder over here so that later on it's easy for you to select them all and zip them up and put them in the proper structure. Like you can see here, I have cinematics and environment and tram, and there's the files that are in there. So when it's time, I just zip those up and they're ready to go to turn into a mod. But in the meantime, it's good to have a working folder so you're not always working within the game. Anyhow, don't mind me. I'm going to always continuously go on tangents. We're going to click on that main menu tram cinematic again. We're going to open it, and hey, look, my face is in the robotics factory, right where I left it. And that's kind of what this output window is talking about when it's talking about that. So you can ignore that stuff. It's just doing its job. Then it says setting preview camera coordinates, setting editor camera coordinates, all normal. But let's say I wanted to do something tricky. I'm trying to think of how I could break this real quick. Well, I can't believe that's something that's difficult, but we're going to go ahead and click Create Emitter button just for a second to give you an example. This thing right here, which is just the selection, the properties window, you're going to be working out of this more than anything. I usually like to pull this down, this extra bit, but if you do select this stuff, it can sometimes give you useful information and details underneath, like, what is max particles? Well, clearly it sets the maximum number of particles that can exist at any given time. But maybe you don't know what everything is. Maybe you're like, what the hell is particle blend mode? Well, unfortunately, there's no details. So it's, we can get into that, what that is at a later date. But having this window not fully collapse is a good idea because maybe something might be useful. But you're going to be using this much more than events or history. History is good to have, of course, but this properties window is the bulk of your work along with curves. So in this particular case, I'm going to go over to the properties window. I'm going to see what's the default particle material that's being used here. I know this one. Hey, it's just some white smoke. It's not very interesting. Okay, so instead, we're going to do something different. I'm going to do something I know is going to break it. I'm going to press particle and then 2 key, hit enter. I know that that file doesn't exist. So I'm going to save that. And I'm going to close this. I'm going to reopen it. Recent files. Open up my last cinematic. And now I can look at the output window and look. Error, no shader specified for material, materials dev particle 2 material. I'm pointing to something that doesn't exist, which you always want to point for a particular particle like that, or a 2D asset. You want to point to a material that then points to a actual texture, a DDS file, a 2D asset, because you have to actually set its shader parameters. You can't just load directly 2D assets or textures in. So that's to be expected, but that's why we have the output window for that sort of stuff. In this particular case, I don't need it, I don't want it, we're going to get rid of it. In fact, I don't want this emitter, so we're going to hit edit, delete, get rid of it. Great, now we're back to where we were. So I want to actually start over with a new file and just start to slowly build things and show you how they get built, and hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to click new. No, I don't want to save changes. I'm going to use that later. And we're going to click on Scene, Set Level, File System, Maps. In this particular case, for my use case, it's in menus, but you're probably going to have a file. You can collect any one of these. I'm not sure which ones, I know that the default levels come with the game, like NS2 Summit, for instance, but I don't know what other ones actually come with the game. This game, I've had it for so many years and I've worked on it that there's so many extra levels that you're going to see here. But hopefully there's one that's called Particle Test Room Huge in it. This one is very useful. It's got a big wide area for you, a little box for you to work in with some simple lights. It's very simple. Origin point dead center here. It's good for adding stuff, like especially like if you're going to make some effects, for instance. That's what I like to do with it. All right, so we're going to do that instead of actually doing a menu file, which is a menu background, which is pretty complicated. I think I'm going to actually just do effects. I'm doing this off the cuff, by the way. None of this is rehearsed, so bear with me. All right, so first thing we're going to do here is we're going to start off right off the bat. We're going to create an emitter. Ba ba ba. Now you'll notice that there's physics emitter and there's create emitter. Stay away from the physics emitter. Things crash with the physics emitter. It's very dangerous. I could actually show you in about 10 seconds how easy it is to crash just by pressing the play button and back button. So there are times where you want to use physics objects, and they are complicated, and how you clean them up in the system so they don't crash the game is complicated. I'd rather not get into that for a basic first video. I'll go into that probably at another time, hopefully. Alright, so when you add anything into the game world, whether it's an actor or an emitter, like I just added here, let's say for instance I'm also going to add an actor. Boom, I'm going to click an actor. It's a square box instead of this cone over here, and there's a reason for that because we're establishing a cone. But actors, or an empty actor in this case, is just a little squared box. From here, it wants a model. You don't have to give it a model. You can actually keep it active. You can do a lot of things to this at this point. You can attach events to it. So I'm going to move at a fast pace, so hopefully you guys can keep up, but if not, you can always rewind the video and play it back, I suppose. But I kind of want to cover as much as I can in the basic section as fast as possible. Alright, so the first thing you're going to notice, though, is when I click on something, it's just spawning it in the world. That does us no good most of the time. It's almost never going to be where you want it. So instead, I'm going to edit and delete that particular actor, and I really want to select here the the actual emitter, the particle emitter. Because it just threw it out in the world, it's not aligned. See that this little widget here to denote where the center is? Hopefully you can see that. It's like red or pink, blue, and greenish. Go ahead and click on Origin on the right-hand side in the Properties window. And this is the time where I'm now going to make some adjustments to my screen. So again, with a dual monitor, I would at least move this curves window out of the way, because look at how much more room you get over here. And you can collapse your history and get a lot more. The events window, unfortunately, does not shrink, and it takes up a lot of space, and I hate that. But you need it. It's not actually a window in here. It's part of the properties area. You do need the events for certain cinematics, just not all the time. But, if you have another monitor, it's a lot easier for workspace, obviously. But this is the actual properties window. So when I talk about properties window, here it is. We can start off, again, by go ahead and zero these out. This is the origin. So 0 enter for all three fields. I have now placed it at the dead center. So this is the basics. WASD while holding right mouse button to look around. Let's give it a name. What are we making today? Wish I had somebody to talk to and ask for a vote what we're making here. Not sure what we're going to do. Let's do a bubble. I don't know why, but I love my bubble. I made a bubble for Unearth, and I've always just been so fascinated with making a bubble. Alright, so it's a complicated cinematic, so we're probably not going to go through the entire thing right now, but naming your emitters and really anything in your curves list is very important, so that other people can open it and look at it. Think of it as being like code comments. When you're programming, you want to leave comments for others, or comments for yourself at a later date. Especially if you have a lot of actors or a lot of elements, you really want to be able to quickly reference left catwalk to 1, because you know exactly which one that is, and you were doing something special with it, etc. Alright, so I'm going to bring this back onto the screen here so you can see it, hopefully. And I'm going to put it back down here. Not like that. Not like that. Okay, not like that either. This is the fun part. Alright. I'm going to collapse that preview section. We'll get to it later if we so much as need it. Alright, curves list. Click on the scene, expand the button. So I've named it. It's bubble. That's great. Expand it by clicking the plus button. You'll notice you need a little bit more room, possibly laterally, to scroll down and read all the parameters. So you have two places here, and they do interact with one another. That's properties window here, and the curves list on the left. You're going to see similar stuff, like, for instance, emission rate right there. I'm going to click on it, right? I'm going to use the mouse wheel to scroll out. The lateral bar here is 0. This is when you see this darker centered line, that is 0. The blue bar on the left is actually the time scale. You can notice up top here, it does the same thing here. So I can move it here or here. So we're going to go back. There we go. All right, so that's the emission rate I've selected, right? Now you don't see emission rate on here. If you scroll out enough with the mouse wheel, there it is up top. It doesn't actually, just a straight line right now. If I were to click on it, it creates a little curve point, and it's black because then you can manipulate it and do something with it. You'll notice it gives you what time it's printing out at in seconds, which is important. We'll get to that later. And then a value. So we're just going to put it to 10, put it back to 0 time. So at time 0, the value is 10. If I come up here to the properties window, emission rate. Well, emission rate says 10. Boom, it's already there. Well, hold on, I don't want that. I want to make it 20. And you can manually type it in as well. I always hit enter just in case. Let's restart the cinematic, press play. And things broke. Perfect! This is actually a perfect opportunity. You're going to panic. This is going to happen to you so much in this program. So I'm very happy to have this occur. So when this happens, and you're like, why is that not doing anything before it was actually moving around on my screen? The reason is it's because you actually need to have both windows viewing the origin point of that element. Whether it's an empty actor or a particle, it always needs to be dead center. So a little trick sometimes I do in a window if I'm not working in it is I will zoom out and keep it somewhat centered on that area before I actually hide it. You'll notice I never really fully hide it because I don't trust the system. I like to leave a little sliver so it doesn't do that to me. Okay, we're going to click the restart playback button and then ta-da! There it is again, the default emitter. This is what will always play whenever you add this to the scene. It's a good starting point just to kind of teach the person how to work with the basics of the system. Okay, so press pause there for a second. So we set it to 20 on the right hand side, but look, now it's gone from us down here. We don't see it. I keep zooming out with the mouse wheel and I don't see it. Where'd it go? Well, we set it to 20, so it's higher now. Now, here's something you can do. You can set this over time. You notice as I click the second node here, I clicked another point, suddenly I have 2 red dots that now show up on this timeline up above. You'll notice that they're actually in sync too, so that blue bar will go on top of it when the actual frame scrubber up here reaches the red point here. So at frame 57, which apparently is what this is, if you click and hold down on it and don't move your mouse, you'll notice it says time 1.9. So time 1.9 seconds equals 57 frames. A way to think about time in seconds and frames in this case is that by default your cinematics are 30 frames a second. So for every 30 frames, 1 second has elapsed. So, and this is configurable in the time settings over here. The OK button will always be hidden. Enter won't work, but if you hover over it, you can notice a slight blue highlight. That's what you're going to want to click. This is also where you set the number of frames, right? It defaults to 100. I'm just going to put 200 for now so we have a little more working space. I have never had a reason or an instance to justify changing the frames per second, but should it ever be, that's where you'd want to do it. I've never had to, but there you go. And I'm going to click OK with that little sliver of a UI. Look at that. I've added more frames to my timeline up above and down below in the curve graph here. And you can see how this is still highlighted. Well, you know, I don't really want it at 57 frames. That's just such an odd number. I like to work in odd, even stuff, and not necessarily even numbers, but even increments of things. So, for instance, I'd probably want like 2 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this bar, either here or with the blue one, to frame 60. I'm going to make sure that that's selected, and you never individually click, because if you individually click, this is what a lot of times can happen. It's very rare that you're going to click on something and it's going to stay input with the exact value. So that's 1.87 it says right there, for our value is 17.43. So if I just come over and click normally, it's very easy to move it. Now it's 17.38. So you're going to want to drag, drop, select. It's the safest way to select an actual node on the curves list. I'm going to now utilize the shift key. I'm going to hold it down and then left click, and I'm going to drag it over to exactly that point. You can use the mouse wheel to scroll in, and by the way, hold down the mouse wheel button, the middle mouse button, and you can actually pan around in this view. And yeah, it looks like it's exactly there. And you'll, well, how do I know it's on the right frame? Well, look, if you go one over, that's one over. So you know you're right there on smack dab in the middle. So you know you're in frame 60. So what have I done here exactly, right? I've set this graph. I've started off here at frame 0, at time 0. I have set the emission rate to 20. But come frame 60, or 2 seconds in, the emission rate is now 17.38. You know, that's just not the drop-off I really want. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click this little record keyframe button. And what that's going to do is, you notice that little red screen that shows up now in the editor window? It won't show up in the preview window, by the way, so make sure you're in the editor window, obviously. Whatever change I make right now in these properties lists to this curve window, it's actually going to apply it for this frame only. It won't touch anything that comes before. For instance, if I click on the Z value here, 0, and I want to make it 2, hit enter, it is now moved over there by this frame though. So if I go back to 0, oh you little bastard. Okay, so we're going to undo that. And the reason is, let me show you a little trick before we get into that. There is a little create keyframes button here. So on frame 0, I've hit back all the way. There's a create keyframes button here. We're gonna go deep into this real quick. Forgive me, I work on tangents like a Adderalled kitty, so just bear with me here. We're gonna click on the origin on the left side, right, and we're gonna click on that Z axis again, which is denoted by this little widget you can see at the very bottom here. Red is X, yellow is Y, and blue is Z. So your axis on the singular plane here are X and Z. The upward and downward axis is Y. This is the case for everything. Until, there's always an exception, right? Until you've done something odd, like worked with particle motion, or you've rotated a certain actor, then everything I just said goes out the window, and it starts applying its own local space rules without telling you. But, by and large, you don't have to worry about that. For the most part, these axes are what you're going to work with. Okay, so I've selected the Z axis here. Well, there it is. If I zoom out, I can find it. It's actually down at 0. Well, I'm now going to click on the Create Keyframes button. As soon as I click that, you'll now notice it's, boom, it set a little dot there. Well, what about Y-axis? Boom, it has a Y. X, it has a little dot. Base time? No, that's not needed, actually. Cone angle, it's got a dot. The Keyframe button creates a node point for every single property and element for this thing at that exact moment. So it's like locked in hard. It's a way to save its state and all values. So if I were to come over here and just say I want a Z value of -1, notice how it's gone back a little bit. Let's just do -2 to make things real clear. I have just by touching that in the properties window, I've changed where it starts, and that doesn't mean that changes I make later won't impact it. The change I've made here, if I ever use this window, let's say I make complicated movements for this particular particle emitter, if I later just click on this origin area and change it, I've changed everything. The rest of the animation will play out over here instead of over here. It won't know to tween. It won't know to travel and move over. So that's kind of what I was wanting to point out. Hopefully that makes sense what I just said. I'm going to give you an example right now to make things a little bit more clear, though. All right, so here we are. We're at -2. You can kind of see the horizontal bar there, so we're down just a little bit. And I'm going to go back to frame 60, and I'm now going to press that red button, and I'm going to change this property to 2, just to make things real obvious again. Hit enter. Always hit enter whenever you're going to record keyframes. Again, the little red outline is going to tell you it's active. So I put 2 in the Z-axis. I've hit enter. I'm now going to unclick this. Oh, so important. After you've made a singular change, you turn that bad boy off, otherwise you're going to be in a world of hurt. We're going to hit the back button and play it and see what happens. And you can see the graph down here now. We start at, see what happens when you click things. I just pressed the delete key to delete that extra node. Should you ever accidentally create it, you don't have to hit the back button, you can hit the delete button. Know that every time you do that, though, you do risk the program crashing, so we are going to file, save as FX Tut1. There we go. We're just going to give it a name because it's safe. If I didn't mention this already, I probably didn't. Control S or the save button, you're going to use that bad boy a lot. It is very important. Alright, so back to frame 0, play, and there it goes. From -2 to +2. It's going to keep on playing because that's what it's been told to do. It's an endless playing cinematic right now. Or an emitter, excuse me. But this is just the basic concept. And now at any point, I don't really like that. It's going past, so I'm actually going to take that and I'm going to drag it down just a little bit. Okay, so when's the last frame here? The last frame that's keyed at is 60. Yeah, by frame 60, I think it's okay if it gets right up next to it, but not past it. I don't know what value that is, so I'm going to look up here. It's at 1.6. Great. That works for me. So from here to here. And now it played out. So that's the kind of basics, what we're looking at here for movement. I just kind of wanted to briefly show that so you have an idea, both between the curves list and how to record a singular keyframe. Again, we used the create keyframe to create a base, which means we just created it here. Let's say, for instance, I deleted that. Now, it only knows that singular position. It has nothing to start from. And at any point up here, you'll notice again in the properties window, it's reflected. It's at 1.6. Let's say I didn't want to individually click this red button to create a keyframe, and I just wanted to make a new one. You can do that. Click on it, and let's give it, let's put it maybe, let's put it out to lunch. Why not, right? Let's make this bad boy come in fast and hard. This will actually help with the next demonstration. Oh yeah, let's get you even further. Way outside the level. Cool. You can't see it now. Where'd it go? Okay, we're going to go back to our curves window, and we're going to click on bubble. There it is. Bubble's back. Cool. Alright, so I'm going to press the play button, and watch it come flying in. There we go. Right to the stopping point. Cool. But you know what? I didn't like how natural that looked. I actually want it to look a little bit more rigid, like it's on a track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag select that first node there, and I'm going to right click, and instead of set to KB spline, which is what gives it this beautiful little curve that you can see, I'm actually going to set it to, what? Didn't mean to do that. I'm going to right click and set it to set linear interpolation. Now it's a straight line. So watch it come in. Boom, hard stop. There we go. One more time. Hard stop. Cool. As an example, I'm going to put it back to KB spline so you can kind of see the slow increment and the slow deceleration as it comes in. Slow increase and a slower deceleration. Perfect. So I kind of just wanted to show you guys how that works a little bit. Those are your two options with curve graphs. Let's say I wanted to get real creative. I don't like how slow, like the actual deceleration it takes. It comes in still a little too hard, right? I want to slow that down even more. Well, what if I just create more steps in the way? Well, as soon as I've done that, look how funky that looks. And it does look funky, and as a result, it's going to look funky up top too. So let's see. Oh yeah. Oh boy. Let's look at that one again. It's so fun. I love doing this. I have too much fun in the cinematic editor finding stuff that's silly and shouldn't work. Alright, so in this particular case, it's doing this because it's doing the same KB spline all the way up. Well, I'm trying to do something manual here. I'm trying to do something a little more advanced because I want a better curve than what the game is, what the engine's allowing me. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set this to linear, and then I'm going to set each one of these to linear. And now I'm going to get real deep in my micro management here. I'm going to create little individual, oh, that's a new one. See how I accidentally created it? That's okay. In this particular case, most of the time I don't want that, but in this particular case I'm making more anyways. So let's do it. Each time I'm going to make sure that they're actually set to linear. Cool. And so I'm going to just basically attempting to create something that's a little bit more of a gentle... Oh, that one's... I can tell one of these isn't right. Why are you doing that? I can see a curve. Anyways, it's not too important. That's just an example. So this is something that we're getting into the weeds here. This isn't such basic stuff, but I kind of wanted to show if you're not getting the result you like. Okay, and now things are not wanting to respond. Alright, so at this moment, when things aren't working right, and things just aren't, like I can't pan right now, for instance, we're going to click File, Save, Close it. The whole thing. Don't just go swap to another file. Just restart it. File, Recent. There it is. We're going to click on Bubble again. We're going to reopen up Origin. Z. Let's get our window back here. Alright, and there's where we left off. There we go, and my panning works again. Yay! Oh, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe it's my button. I don't know. Anyways, so it's outside the level here. So I really only care about once it's in the level, which is right about around here, I estimated, and I was right. I don't care about seeing it outside the level. So this is movie magic here, folks. If you can't see it, it didn't exist, and that's the way effects work. So here's the actual sweep. Let's see if it's any better. It's a little better. I could do a lot better than that. We're going to grab these two nodes, shift, drag them, drag the, oh boy, now we're getting into it. Oh boy, okay, well, let's not do that. Let's make it a lot more gentle than how it was. And this is just total user preference stuff, and I just kind of wanted to show how this is possible. You can spend a whole lot of time, and I'm probably doing this unnecessarily, but I kind of just wanted to take the time to do it anyways. That way everybody's aware of how in the future. Because you're not always going to get the results that you want right off the bat with the default systems. So I like to do evenly spaced for the most part. I'd select multiple of them. Oh, side note, selecting multiple nodes at once is a risky proposition. Be forewarned. I recommend doing individual. If you try to work with multiple, it is a very easy way to crash the program. It happens way more often than it should, but it's just a natural thing. So, alright, it's a little bit better, I think, maybe. It's good enough for the tutorial at least. We're going to file, save, let's see how it looks. Yeah, it's a little gentler. It could be smoothed out. Oh, it could for sure be smoothed out somewhere around here. I don't know if you're able to see that. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, it slows down too much there and then picks up again. Probably because of you. You're my little... keep creating extra... So remember my advice? Drag, drop. There you go. That solves that problem. Alright, so that's probably a little better. Let's see that. Yeah, there we go. Like he's coming into home base. Cool. File, save. Alright, so I said I was going to do a bubble, but I really wanted to just kind of show off some of these basics first, that way you kind of understood. I'm going to select all of them and do something very dangerous here. I'm going to press the delete key. Oh, did things crash? Doesn't look like it. Excellent. We're going to go back to that first frame, and actually you'll notice that this little red dot here still exists, and that's because it thinks something still exists at that time frame. It's wrong. Something doesn't exist at that time frame. We haven't changed anything but positional values, but it still seems to think it does. When I see this, I usually don't panic. I usually save, close, reopen. Get used to this procedure. It's your new life. Hey, is it there? Let's find out. It's still there. Oh, that's a shame. Well, who knows what it's doing? Maybe, I'm not really sure. It's probably talking to somebody. Not X, not Y, not Z. No. So, I don't know where that's coming from. I don't know what other element it's what we touched on. Oh, emission rate. Hey, I forgot about you, emission rate. Okay. Great. We're going to go back to emission rate real quick. We're going to disable Z. We're going to go back to that first frame, and we're going to make sure that the origin is set somewhere where we can see it, not -38. We're going to put it back to 0. Hit enter. Cool. That's now the only frame it has, because we deleted the others, if you recall. And in fact, in this moment, I'm going to save it. And here's our little thing. So, our emission rate. This is where things get interesting. They weren't already. We're starting off at what emission rate here? Let's collapse this and look. We're looking at 17.3, right? And why is it saying 17.3? If we go back, it starts at 20, and then counts down, because what we did earlier with this little 2 points. So for the rest of the time, it's going to keep playing at 17.3. I'm going to jack that way down. I'm going to put that to 1.7. Now you're going to watch it come out, and then afterwards slowly trickle. Don't make me a liar. Don't make me a liar. It's making me a liar. That's great. Okay, that's fine. We're going to go down even further then. Let's see how you like that. Alright, we're going to fight too. That's fine. We're going to have a fight. There we go. So what I've done here is I've moved that little, if you didn't see that, I apologize with I'm trying to show too many things here. What I've done is I've moved that ending point further down to a low value of 1.5, and then, there I go, creating more of them. And then I've also moved it to the left side of the screen, so an earlier time frame. What this is doing is it's actually saying at 0 time throw out a crap ton, and then right after floor it, meaning bring it all the way down. Not floor, it doesn't go fast. this is how you would make something spit out fast in multiple directions, to the left, to the right, this way if you wanted different axes, and then no longer go that direction. So if you wanted to say have, for instance, sparks that flew out and then came up, that's how you would do it. Without doing that, they would just rise up straight from the center. But you want that little bit of width, and so that's what you would do. You would actually have it drop down nice and fast at different values. At different heights, it's going to do different things, and basically it's a height, the high end to low end relationship on a time graph. So the further away you get, the more diminished that impact it's going to have, and the closer, obviously, the more stark of a difference it's going to have, including, again, height. The higher it is compared, even more so. So you can kind of see we've created this little sputtering thing going on here. And now this would be a lot more noticeable if we were doing something with sparks, for instance, like I said, individual little particles, and also a different type of emission behavior. So we're going to move on from this so that I can get to actually talk to you about some of these properties. And again, you're going to always notice a lot of these properties are repeated over here, but that's because these properties, a lot of the times, they're going to give you a singular value to work with, as like we saw earlier with the emission rate. Oh, I set a value here, but I don't want it to just be that value. I want it to change over time. Well, you can do that using this little record keyframe button, but, if I press play here, whoa, well, that went so fast. Is that really what I want? Did that work out right? Or even worse, how do I change that little red dot? That red dot is there. I can, I guess, record over it, but what about in between? What if I want to tweak it? Well, that's where the curves list comes into play, and that's why we've been playing with it down here. So I'm just explaining that there are overlaps between the properties section and the curves window for very good purposes. Properties window is a good printout in real time of what's going on, but the curves list is primarily where you're going to work. I'll be honest, it's the meat and potatoes of what you're going to do. You're going to set initial values in the properties window, and then you're going to tweak things within the curves list to create some interesting stuff over time, most of the time. Okay, let's have a little drink here before I continue. Okay, moving on. Let's start talking about some of these properties. Alright, so we have our name, which we've already set. It's visible. Great. Let's hit it to false. It's no longer visible. Oh boy. So now no matter what you do, it's not visible. That's fine. Go ahead and reselect it back to true. There are some clever ways that you can prevent certain weird oddities occurring from your cinematics, and that is to go to the last frame. You'll only be able to go to one frame before the last, by the way, unless, pro tip, you come into this window, grab the blue bar, and move one over frame. Now you're really at the last frame. But for what I'm telling you here, it's fine. Use the track bar, get to frame just before the last. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to press the red button, and I'm going to hit true for visible value to false. And you're like, well, why would you do that? The reason is I'm going to click this left arrow here and go one frame before to frame 198. I'm going to record button again, change it to true. And now, as far as it knows, this whole time it's playing, all these frames, it's set to true. But at the very end here, the very last second, it's being set to false, which means truly, bam, on frame 200, it tells it to cease rendering. This is important in some cases if you have, like, say, a child cinematic, which I'll explain later. If you have, like, a child cinematic, for instance, on an event, and you've set something to play, like, let's say something like this, something like a smoke, but you only wanted it for, the 200 frames you made it for, but boy, it's playing for like 2 minutes now, and you did not intend for that. Well, this is how you stop that. You would set a true and false flags in the last few frames of your child cinematic. That way it's telling the engine to stop, to shut off, to be done. This gets a little trickier in regards to opacity. So, for instance, if I wanted this to fade out correctly right here at this particular time so that it doesn't just do this, boom, completely blank, if I didn't want that, for instance, there's some tricks you can do, and this actually has to do with like how you set up your cinematic, such as emitter lifespan and over time, and it gets complicated. I'm going to really try hard here to explain things briefly, but there's so many use cases and exceptions that I'm hoping not to confuse you with the information I'm dumping into your head right now. Okay, so let's move along just for a second. That little trick I taught you right there, I'm just saying it. You don't have to do it every time. It's not needed every time. It's not needed for every element every time. It's just if you run into something that's playing longer than it should, especially for a child cinematic, which again I'll explain later what that is, then that's how you fix that. So in this particular case, I don't care. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to set it. Moving on. Base time. Base time is a great concept. It is a terrible execution. I say that with a lot of hate in my heart because I have depended on it before and it has sadly failed me. Failed me horribly. But there are use cases for it. Very specific small use cases for it. So over here on the curves list, you got base time. And now you're going to notice, well, let me move this out of the way so you can see, there's little ticks that show up there. I'm going to click it again so you can see. Hopefully that renders in the video. Maybe if I put the blue bar over it, you can see it better. There. So that little base time is checked and you can hopefully see it showing up right here. Don't click here because you're going to change the base time. Hey, click the time frame scrubber to get away from that base time, so you can now click the base time and move that independently. Base time is a fancy way of saying this is when this should start playing. So maybe I don't want it showing up at frame 0. Maybe I want it showing up at frame 5. That's when it just begins showing. Well, I'm going to move this bad boy over here to frame 5. And now when I hit back and play, there we go. It starts at frame 5 instead. And we can verify this by moving back. And yep, nothing plays, nothing plays, nothing plays. We're at frame 6 now, and then frame 7 it actually comes into play. And it's delayed here because the actual mission behavior is set to over time instead of instant, and we'll get to that in a moment here. But that's base time. Base time lets you get just a small delay. And I'm going to let you know right now, it's a small delay. It is a small delay. Do not attempt to use this bad boy at like 30 frames plus. Bad things start happening. Let's see if it starts happening right now. So here's 69 frames later. Let's see what happens. Of course it works. Of course it works. Okay, I'm telling you right now, don't depend on this. It will screw you over more often than it actually helps you. If you need to have a delay within your cinematic, utilize child cinematics. And this is a perfect segue to bring in where to do that. So normally that base time wouldn't do that. Particularly in this case, I think it was doing it because it's such a simple default thing, but don't just take my word on it. Don't rely on that unless it's only like a few frames of a distance that you need to offset something. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a world of hurt and pulling your hair out later and wondering why. That's why. Don't trust that thing. Okay, so what was I just saying before that? I was talking about base time that led to overtime particles. That's right. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that just yet. We're going to talk. I'm not going to segue. We're going to skip ahead for a second here because I want to go in order to not confuse you all. Okay, so origin. This is the origin point. This is where it starts. We already went over this, right? X is this direction, Z is this direction, and Y is either up or down. So if you get confused, look at that little widget down there on the bottom left. It's never going to steer you wrong unless you get into particle motion or change the rotation of an actor. Anyways, so we're going to click on angles here. Angles is going to allow roll, pitch, and yaw. These things do change. They mean different things for different objects. And I know that sounds stupid. I know you say, but, you know, iron, these are universally definable things. And roll is roll, pitch is pitch. Well, no. A lot of times this goes out the window in practice. And it's hard to explain why, but there are cases where it occurs, especially with child cinematics and different models, actors, physics, objects, you name it, and particle frickin' motion. So there's a lot of pain in my voice, and you can hear that because a lot of the stuff, the rules that you're used to go out the window. So what I'm going to tell you instead is assume the best, but plan for the worst. So roll, quite simple. You can see that thing rotating, right, which is what you think roll should do. I'm going to actually put the viewpoint here so you can see a little bit better. So there you go. I'm actually rotating it just like you'd expect a roll to do. Cool. Next is pitch. And pitches should be like your up or down. Oh, but look. Oh, wait. I'm clicking the wrong thing. There goes my tone. Yeah, there we go. So pitch is changing the up and down, as you'd expect. So it's going to look further down. If I include that pitch, make it go higher. You know, obviously if I go at 90, it's going to look a straight down. Boom. 90 degrees downward. So obviously working in degrees. Yaw. Does exactly what you think it does. In this particular case, it's... Oh, I'm clicking everywhere. So each one's got their own little bag of tricks. You're going to play with these as needed. You can, of course, assign them, just like we did before, to the movement vectors, to the actual origin points. You can assign them keyframes and change them over time, etc., etc., etc. We're not going to do that. I just wanted to explain what they were, so we're going to zero those back out. Emitter lifespan. So emitter lifespan, this is... That's right, I wanted to talk about child cinematics. Okay. but first, emitter lifespan. So emitter lifespan is a funky little thing. Basically, all it's saying is for how long in seconds am I going to be doing this? Am I going to be performing the operation and the action that I meant to do here? You know what? What did I do earlier? I'm going to change that. I don't like the way it looks, so it's bugging me. Forgive me 1 second. I'm taking a hot second to change this. Our emission rate, I'm just going to leave it high. I'm not going to drop it down. Okay. So here it is. Nice and bright. I'd never use this texture, this asset. Nobody would, but, you know, it's the default one, just to sell a point here. So it's got a lifespan of 1 second. And the first thing you're going to say is, but iron, notice how it's cutting out because of what we did earlier? Otherwise, it would be playing endlessly if I didn't. See how it keeps playing? This is the cinematic editor. It'll always keep playing. It'll never stop on the last frame. Never, never, never stop on the last frame. It'll play endlessly, even if your cinematic isn't meant to do that. So I'm just going to hit back and repeat it. And I guess this is a time for me to actually change what we did earlier, because to explain emitter lifespan, I need to do that. So, where's my lifespan? Visible. Here is the visible flag is basically what we touched earlier. There it is. Deleting both of those. Clicking save, because anytime you delete something, you better save. Alright. And now you're going to notice that it's going to play forever, because I'm not telling it to stop rendering. Ta-da! There it goes. I've created, this is referred to as an endless cinematic. It's something that I have set up ahead of time that will, on its own, if I place in the world, play forever. That's the general gist of it. It's not something that you would want for, like, say, an impact effect, like a muzzle flash or a ricochet or blood. Those are things that are instant and they have a lifespan, but, you know, for fire, for a car wreck that you know is always going to be there, you want something that's endless. There's tons of times knowing how to set up your cinematic ahead of time means everything. It's going to make the difference between whether you pull your hair out or not, is the honest truth. You can't really go backwards. The way you're going to craft your cinematics, you need to craft them with knowing whether or not they're going to be... You just start from the ground floor, essentially, knowing whether or not they're going to be an endless cinematic or whether or not they're going to be an instant cinematic. So those are your choices. You build everything around those two. There's some exceptions, but I'm not getting into those right now. But knowing how to craft your cinematic from the ground up is crucial. Otherwise, you're going to scrap everything. There is no undo button. Everything's going to shape around primarily those two types. So, okay. So, emitter lifespan, it's at 1 second. But this is continuing to play forever, clearly. Why is it doing that? Because its relationship with emission behavior. I realize we just skipped max particles and cone angle. That's fine. Max particles is by default set to 256. For performance reasons, if you know what you're doing is kind of expensive, you can chop that down, say 50, right? And obviously what that's going to do is it's going to chop how many are being shown on screen. If I wrote 2, for instance, you're now only going to get 2 at a time. Poof, poof, there it is. All right, so you get the concept. I don't have to get into that. Cone angle, same business. It's just how wide that cone angle is that the emitter's spawning from, which can have different results if you wanted to go out in a wider surface area or wider volume of space, for instance, or a more narrow volume of space, for instance, which we want a singular place for it to go. There are use cases for both. But you now have max particles and cone angle briefly explained so that you clearly understand them, so I can move on to emission rate, which we've already covered, and emission behavior. So there's a relationship here between lifespan and behavior, and this is what I want to get into. Okay, where to start here? Over time is how you want to set up most of the time. You want over time for setting up endless cinematics. This is because over time has an inherent delay built into it. You can get crafty and you can create the other option, an instant one, duplicate it, and then create a completely separate over time one, so that in your finished cinematic you see this instant spark, and then, or this instant effect, followed up by what looks like just a continuation of it, because you've made 2 different elements, right? 2 different emitters. You can do that. That's possible. I did that with like Gorge Spit. But you, by and large, just keep in mind, if it's over time, you can have one-time playing, so meaning something that's only going to burst open. You can still have it over time. Just know that you're going to have this inherent delay. And by that, what I mean is well, this isn't, of course. I'm having all the luck today of examples. But traditionally speaking, maybe it's my emission rate. Maybe that's why it's doing that. Okay, so if I set emission rate to 5, will it do that? Let's see. Yeah, so look at that. You're going to have, there's 4 frames of nothingness. That's generally what you're going to be running into. It's going to have a delay. But the real true nature of over time is that it's saying don't push all of these out at once. Push them out in a staggered formation or frequency. And that's what you can see here if I'm slowing down. It's pushing them out, bloop, 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 one after another. If I change this instead to instant, let's observe the difference. They all come out at once. Look at that. So 5, I set the emission rate to 5. So you're getting 5 of them instantly popping out all at once. That isn't what we want in this case. That is, there are other cases where you're going to want that. You don't really want that for like smoky things, obviously, or an endless cinematic most of the time. So the relationship between that and the emitter lifespan is such. The emitter says, how long am I alive for? The lifespan behavior, just below it, says loop or kill, will define and dictate a lot of this behavior. There is a relationship between lifespan, behavior, by the way, lifespan behavior and lifespan, these two are integral. They're connected, obviously, but so is the emission behavior. If I do over time, middle lifespan of 1 is fine. Let's change it to 5 and see what happens. And we're still telling it to loop. You're going to see it play for 5 whole seconds. And you're going to get these little odd... Oh, did I set the max particles? No, that's fine. Why is it jumping out? Okay. Bad test case. That's fine. Not the best test case. I'm having all the luck today. I'm going to put it to 0.1. So the emitter's only lasting for 0.1 seconds, but it's looping, so it's creating new ones. So what you're actually getting at here is a faster rate. But you notice how still... I'm working with only an emission rate of 5, but we've made this look a little bit better. That's why I've set the emitter lifespan to 0.1. You don't always want to do this because it can be more costly. You can actually, and then also you can sometimes end up with weird timing effects the lower it goes. But I just kind of, this can be complicated. I don't unfortunately have a good test case set up ahead of time to demonstrate this to you. Again, I apologize. This is off the cuff due to request from Psychman, just to make something for everybody so they have some general idea what they're doing. But the emitter lifespan has a direct relationship to those other 2 items, so I want you to keep that in mind. Maybe I'll open up a file actually and show you some examples of it. That might be a better way to do it. But in any case, keep that in mind. If I were to kill this, it's pretty obvious that once it plays once for 1 second, it dies. Look at that. So I'm playing it over time, but it's still only dying. So let's set this instead to 3 seconds. It's going to play for 3 seconds, and then it's going to kill itself. And it's all playing over time. And 1, 2, 3, and boom, and now it's done. That makes sense, right? Let's also go back over to behavior and set it to instant. What's going to happen here? The emitter lifespan is set to 3 seconds, but the emission behavior is instant. So, any predictions on what's going to happen? That's that, folks. You saw it. Doesn't matter that I set the emitter lifespan to 3 seconds. Because I set it to instant, it's gone. So, what about if I went loop for every kill, and I set this down to 0.2 seconds, and now it's instant? Granted, I'm only pushing out 5 of these at a time. My emission rate is still 5 instead of 20. Notice how it looks similar, but as far as volume and frequency goes, but it's got this horrible stutter to it, where it's killing itself, basically, right? And why is it doing that? Could it be because the max particles limit is being hit? No. Oh, by the way, this is a good time. Click that left top side of the window again, where we looked at unlit and lit before, and there's a little button that says Show Statistics. This is... Hey, why aren't you working? Show statistics. Ruh-roh. That should be working. That's not good that that's not working. I distrust things shutting down after saving. Oh, that's not good. Okay, so it broke in the internal version apparently, which is what I'm using. Oh, it works down there in the rendering. That's fine. Okay, so... You know, this is, I only briefly wanted to bring this up just to, again, sidetrack, tangent, iron horse here. I wanted to kind of show you that there's some information you get here, such as draw calls, primitives, memory allocated, lights, static meshes, particle emitters that are in use, that kind of stuff. It's useful. It also shows you how many seconds waiting for render thread or GPU. These are good, like, optimization and kind of metrics for you to look at, essentially, so that you can optimize what you're doing. So I've set the emission rate to 5 here, as we did before. I'm actually going to kill this now. I don't need it. I just kind of wanted to show that option. Normally it works up here too, as you saw, but for some reason it's not. So the emission rate set to 5, and emission behavior set to instant, and what we're seeing is this really janky disappearing thing, right? And why is that? Well, now we're going down to particle lifespan. Particle lifespan is only set to be at 1. So the emitter lifespan is at 0.2. So what happens if I turn this up to 2? Oh, look at that. We can actually see it increasing. And the only reason we're seeing it increasing is because I'm already further along in the timeline. If I was back here, we wouldn't be seeing that. But, just as an example, now, you know, I don't like how this back end here, how it's just coming into existence, it's just popping. So this is actually a good time to take a break from the particles area for a second and show you something else, because I go on tangents. Down here in the curves list, we're going to open up particle opacity scale. So on the properties window, while you can set a static value of the minimum and maximum opacity value, let's set this to 0.7, actually get a little bit dimmer, put this one to 0.4. And let's do 0.35, actually, half the value. Okay, I want it a little bit more, a little dimmer. So while you can set that, and you can see it occur right there, there's also right below it the scale. So, and here's the scale. It's just set to 1, as you can see here as well. I wanted to actually have this, the scale as a way to work it over time. So we've established the minimum and the maximum, but obviously if I set the scale from 1 to 2, I've doubled that. I hope that's clear to everybody and that doesn't need more explanation, but I've doubled the maximum, so now technically it's at, what, 1.4 for the maximum? So that's the idea behind the scale, and what's great about it is that this is how you're going to make things fade in, fade out of time. So at 0 seconds in, or frame 0, I'm going to set this to a value of 0. I'm very lucky right now with the curves list, moving it to a time of 0 and a value of 0. That almost never happens. Today's the day, I guess. Most of the time, you're going to get something that looks more like this. Negative 0.02. Well, I don't want that. No, I don't want that. 0.001. Are you kidding me? And this is what you're going to be dealing with a lot of the time. When that happens, select this bad boy. Again, make sure that you are on time 0 or frame 0. Or optionally, you can also just drag this guy all the way back to frame 0, which is really what you should do, honestly. And now you're going to go ahead and click that record keyframe button, and you're going to go to opacity scale, and you're going to make sure it says 0. Of course, I didn't have it on 0. Let me change that just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so it's at 0.17 right now at frame 0. I don't want that. I want opacity of 0, which means it does not render. I've turned off the keyframes. I'm now, over the course of, how many frames is this now? This is 15 frames. That's good enough time. I am turning it back on. And you know what? Instead of dragging and dropping it, I can always click that record button and set it to what I want again over here to 100. But I'm just going to drag it and drop it because I like working with the curves list. It's faster. All right, so I set it to 1. And you know what? After enough time, let's see, 3 seconds? I think, let's give it 4 seconds. Why not? Because how long is our particle lifespan? Particle lifespan of 4 seconds. Alright, so that actually gives us something to work with. At 3.7, by the way, notice if I'm moving up and down, it's hard to see probably, but this isn't straight right now. I'm changing the value from 1, so keep that in mind. You can always, obviously, manually go to that point, click the record, and set it manually. So let's do that, actually. Let's go right now. We know that this is at, what second? 3.77. Cool. It's at 1 right now. That's actually what we want. And then, let's say at frame, 4 seconds in. Ooh, that's 4 right there. Here's 4. Alright, so we know where 4 seconds is. We're going to put that on there. Since we already have a node select, we're going to record. And we're going to set the scale to 0 again. So now the idea is that it's going to go from not rendering to slowly up to full rendering. Opacity hopefully is explainable to everybody. I hope you know what that is, transparency, opaqueness. It's going to stay at 100% visible until a certain point when it's going to drop off. This is too steep of a drop off. I can already tell you. Over here we had 15 frames, which is good enough, but we don't have it over here. So I'm going to hold down Shift and just move it in. In fact, I like things to fade out a lot. So a little bit extra. What is that set to? 99, so 100 basically. 20 frames, that's good. File, save, because we've done things. Okay, going back over. Look at that. No more juddery start anymore. And they fade out nicely at the end. Ooh. Okay, this is what you want to do per element. all the time. A good effect almost always does not pop in or pop out. Make sure you utilize that opacity scaling. It doesn't matter what you set your min and max to. You want things to fade in and out. They look better. So what I've just done here is I've shown you how to change emitter lifespan behavior compared to the, well, change emitter lifespan in combination with lifespan behavior in combination with the emission behavior. So it looks like, you know, we've set it to instant, right? And we've only put the lifespan down to 0.2 seconds, but look, it's still endlessly playing because we have set it on loop as well. So we can get different results, essentially, is what I'm saying, by playing with these three values in combination. If you're running into a problem and you know you're not getting the right look, try messing with these. Try different things out. They serve different purposes, and I could go into a whole separate video about how to use all three of these things with proper examples. And like I said, maybe I'll open up something to actually show you. But I kind of want to move down just to explain things further. Okay. But what I did here with the emission rate, you know, and the time, I know that this is more costly. I wouldn't do this normally because it's a lazy way to do it. I would want to instead do over time, set it maybe again to 1, set the emission rate back up to 10, and that's probably going to give me a better result. The opacity is still in effect, of course, so it still comes in. Yeah, so that's just going to produce a better result overall. It's going to have more spread out particles. It prevents a little bit of overdraw too in some cases. There's a whole lot of reasons why I would go that route. But if I'm making sparks or impact, again, I'd probably go with an instant. So anyways, moving on. Particle material. This is where we're actually going to select what we want here. What is rendering? What's in front of us? Little 3 dots. Go ahead and click that. And now you're going to open up. This is where it defaults to. Does it default to here, or was I in here? It might have defaulted here. Oh yeah, particle material is what we're using, so of course it defaults in there. You're never going to work out of this folder. Ignore this folder. Never look in here again. It's basically dev stuff. You're not going to use this stuff that's in here, this particular file path. Ignore that. Most of the stuff you're going to want to play with is going to be in cinematics, and it's going to be in VFX materials. Boom. There's a lot of fun stuff to play with in here. This is the folder and the file path you're going to want. Occasionally, very rarely, you might want to go into the effects folder, which is... can't believe I forgot an effects folder. Where's my effects folder? Is it materials effects? I'm having a brain fart. It shows you how often I use that folder. There's only a few cool things in there that you know, if you don't find in this folder, you might find in that one. But of course, I'm having a brain fart right now, so I swear it was in there. Anyways, there's a folder that's... Oh, there it is. Effects. So, materials effects. I'm just blind. So there's some in here, right? You're going to find some. Like, oh, look, there's shrapnel. Let's see what shrapnel looks like. Ugh, look at that bad boy, right? Of course, it's not set up at all, and it's not being used how it should be right now. So, but what about a shockwave, right? Hey, look at that. That's the shockwave. We don't like that. That's not how you would normally use that. Nanospark. I know what this is. Yeah. Ooh, twinkly lights. So there's some files in here that you could play with, but it's a little sparse. You might find 1 or 2 things. I think this is like the original alpha version of... Yeah, it is. That's the original alpha version of Lurk Spores. Yeah, look at that. Ooh, boy, haven't seen that in a long time. So, anyways, look like little bacteria, don't they? Anyways, you won't really work out of that folder, but if you're like missing something, or you're like, man, where's all the other stuff that I saw? I know this exists, right? Like, where's all the other stuff? Well, that's where it's going to be, is materials effects. But the majority of the time, it is going to be cinematics, VFX materials. That is the majority. It's where you're going to really work out of too, for the most part. There's exceptions, obviously, like for instance, if you're doing something that's for a specific life form. Let's go click on, well, of course, there's nothing here for that. Okay, well, so much for that example, right? Don't mind that. That's my printer. It likes to come to life randomly sometimes. It's a great $600 spent. I don't know why it does that, though. Okay, so like in the rifle here, for instance, there's some muzzle flash material you could utilize, but yeah, we're going to ignore that. For the most part, you're just going to work out of VFX materials. Alright, so I'm going to open up something here that I know exists already. probably put it under VFX, didn't I? Yes, I did. There it is. VFX bubble. Man, it's been a long time coming, bubble, but here we go. We finally got to you. Alright, so particle material is where you set that actual material file. And you're going to say, well, it's a material file. What is that? So material files are essentially, here's that same folder, by the way, VFX materials. They are a way to denote a shader and really point to the 2D asset. But you can do a lot of things in these materials. So for instance, here's a normal map texture, but if I open up the Reflect Blast material, you're actually seeing, I'm going to close that window. Why is that? Okay. You're actually going to see, there's the shader that it's referencing here is Refract Normal Surface Shader. So normal map here is going to point to the actual DDS, the actual texture file. So that's kind of the case here with most of these. There's some really interesting stuff that you can pull off too in some cases that are more than just a refract shader. You wouldn't want a refract shader for a normal 2D texture, for instance. So let's see if I can give you a better one. Here's a fire glow material. This might actually have, that's just an emissive. That's disappointing. Oh, here's an animated one, fire ground. Okay, so I'm going to open up an animated one. Now it's setting the number of frames and the frame rate. This is important because this is actually a flipbook shader here. In this flipbook, yes, of course, this flipbook is going to have 16 frames, I think it said, right? Yep, 16 frames. You didn't see it, but I did. And here they are. This looks like it's for probably the ground fire from the flamethrower. And so we have 16 frames here. Let's show that. Rulers? No, not rulers. I'm stupid. View grid. Boom. And it's, so I didn't put the grid in the right place because there's more than that. But anyways, you can kind of get the idea here. This is the actual texture file itself, and it's going to be playing it over a frame rate of 24. And then it's pointing the emissive map, and there it actually is. So you have this, you have the actual shader, you have some other parameters, you have the file. This is what a material file is. Use it. You can't not use it. It will only point to material files. So create yourself, if you're going to create a custom asset, create a material file for whatever that DDS file that you've created is. All right. So moving on, let's look at our beautiful bubbles. Ah, yes, beautiful bubbles. I love it. I love it. It was so much fun to make. Okay. Next up is particle blend mode. Additive. Additive is going to be the cheapest one. It's going to be primarily the thing you use. You want additive almost always. It's rare that you don't. Your other option is going to be subtractive, which is how you get those cool little fade effects, basically, that I helped create. They were actually, I didn't create the original negative ones, but the ones that are in the game right now, I've created those. So that little negative light look, that dark look you get in game, that's subtractive right there. And it's going to be the inverse color-wise of whatever you selected for the color. So in this case, I put white, right? What happens if I pick green? Ooh, it goes purple. There you go. So subtractive light. It's fun. You can do some fun things with it, but it's really easy to go overboard, and it's just a lot cheaper and makes more sense to go with additive. Hey, look, I left them green. I'm not going to change that. Okay, after that, you also got combine. Combine is what I love if you want to do something darker. So a good example of this is like a type of smoke, for instance, if you really want it black, or let's say like the Halloween gorge spray I did years ago where it's got bats that come out, and those are black bats. You'd want to utilize combine. Combine is basically taking the particle and combining it with the world around it. So it's a little different from additive, where additive just says, I'm going to add this on top of the scene. Combine finds a happy medium in between them. So here's the difference. You can see that. It's a little lighter additive. And combine's a little darker. So this makes a lot more sense, actually. I said I wasn't going to change this, but I changed my mind. Here's purple. Nice dark purple. So you can kind of see how it's got this little darkness to it, right? Now we're going to go ahead and put that back to additive. And that's a gross color. I don't like it. And it's too neon. Bleh. So I'm going to go back to combine. It's up to you to decide how you want to do that. It's just purely a choice. It's an artistic decision thing. But it's on you, and there are use cases for both, so play around with that. It's totally up to your discretion. Particle alignment, it's going to align to the camera. World is useless. I'm just going to tell you, it's almost always useless, because world aligns to one thing. World aligns to the floor, which can be handy if you're making something that's only going to go up and down, I guess, but you can't really lock it to any other axis, so you're never going to really use this. It's rare. I'll say that. It's insanely rare you're ever going to use it, because this is it. It gets no better than that. It looks ridiculous, too. So there may be a use case for it, but anyways, particle motion. I could have a whole separate video on particle motion. Things get complicated with particle motion. That's the nice way to say it. You're going to notice how these look a little oblong now. That's because down here we probably have, particle motion stretch set to 1. Let's have fun. Let's put it to 5. Whoa, look at that. So particle motion can not only do this, particle motion can take existing velocity values and it can play with them. So it can do a lot of different things, like actually going in a direction that you want. And stretching a certain way. So like if you want sparks, for instance, this is what I would use. I want that long trail of a spark. I would actually utilize particle motion. Particle motion is how I've done some other things. Let's just pull this up real quick. No, not Steam apps. We're going to open up something else because it is now time to show blah, 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 blah. Where is my tree? Good old unearthed tree. Tree insect swirl, is this the one? I can't remember which one it is. It's probably this one. Oh boy, don't crash. Not responding. No! Okay, it loaded. Great. Oh, good, and it has the reference model and the reference file still in it. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to play. You're going to notice I have two things here only. Bugs 2 and Bugs 1. And they're both going to be particle motion. Particle motion, look at that. And you might notice they just went everywhere right now. By moving your view and moving around, or looking away and back again, you send everything flying. Prepare yourself for that. But particle motion can kind of do this stuff right here, where you see it going around a certain curve, a certain set path. That can be very useful. So you can stretch them out with cool effects. Let's do that. Let's do that on the blue one. Yeah, let's do it on the blue one. I'll pause it for a second so we don't destroy everything. Particle motion stretch. Yeah, let's go ahead and let's just get crazy. Let's go 60. Oh man, that looks ridiculous. All right, let's go 40. That's still ridiculous, but why not? Oh, it's going to jitter too because the actual animation I have for them is the flapping. So yeah, you can create paths with them. You can do other little fun stuff like stretching them out. You can only do that with particle motion. So, and editing it is a nightmare. I'm just warning you ahead of time. To edit this is a god-awful nightmare. Case in point, let's just do it right now. We're not going to save this file. Why not? Bugs 2 is, I don't know, let's grab it and find out which one it is. It's blue. Cool. So Bugs 2 is blue. Alright, Bugs 2, and let's go to, let's look at our velocity scales here. Alright, real simple z-axis, simple y, simple x. That's not bad, actually. I thought that was going to be a lot worse. How am I think that's actually, is it the force? Oh, yes. Okay, here's where it is. So, with particle motion, you're going to set a velocity, right? And I know I didn't talk about that yet, but up here is particle velocity. There's your minimum and maximum velocity. You're going to set a velocity, and then to get it on a certain path, you're going to lean on particle force. So particle force is a way of saying gravity, basically. It's a way of like, I have this velocity, right? So it's something that's shooting out of a cannon, but gravity pulls it down over time. So in that case, I would set it to, typically a y value of, 9.8 to simulate gravity. So that's the idea, is that particle force is a way to utilize gravitational forces to create an actual flow, a pattern. So what you're seeing here, that this weird looking monstrosity in the curve graph, this is how I'm achieving that curve that you see. You're going to see it in the y-axis. You're going to see it, so the x and the y-axis, you're going to see it because they are curving up. But just the right way. And the relationship between the two matched has to be similar but inverted. So that's how I'm getting this particular effect of them wrapping around kind of like an X at equal intervals roughly. You don't want to make it look too similar, otherwise it doesn't look natural. So this is basically what it looks like. And if I were to grab one of these and move it, yeah, completely out to lunch. Look at that. And now when I play, it all goes away and has to start from the beginning. You can't modify it and just in that moment see it. So now look what I've done. I've moved it slightly higher, And just by moving it slightly higher, that one singular point, everything is completely different. We're going to call it different. In fact, even the way that it's supposed to end up there is different. No longer does it curve around again. It goes out to lunch. This is particle motion. You are painting in the dark with particle motion. Just keep that in mind. Because you can't see a change you've done, you have to restart the whole thing. And it will often lie to you, even when it doesn't. So you start over from scratch and you make a change and you go, oh look, see, I thought I put it to the right value and maybe I didn't. Oh boy, we've done it now. I'm not even going to bother continuing. You get the idea. You get the idea. Oh yeah, I've told. See, now I've wondered how I ever accomplished this initially. A lot of heartache. Oh God, that pains me. How it's just so completely different. One singular point. So keep that in mind. Changing one part of this in the force changes the rest. That's the relationship if you're trying to make a pattern of movement for particle motion. It's a nightmare. Try to keep it simple. Try not to do this. It's only a few times I've ever had to do something like that, and it can be a little difficult. So, all right. So that's particle motion for you. I'm going to disable that now because we don't really want it. We want it camera aligned, which just means it's going to be 2D for us. It's just going to show up right in front of our face. Moving on, particle lifespan. How long does it last for? These actual particles floating out. So we have the emitter, which is the emitter that's putting things out. Then we have the actual particles themselves, right? So let's do a 0.5 and just to show off what that looks like. Bloop, 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 and they're gone instantly. Cool. Hopefully you understand that. Particle color, we already went over that. You can click the swatch and then click on this little thing and select a particular color. And you can even go into here and define custom color patterns if you'd like as well. There's a huge range that you can play with. Obviously, if you set it to black, what do you think is going to happen? Any guesses? It goes invisible. Because you basically set the alpha to 0. You might be able to get just a little bit out of it, and that is because we're using combined lighting. If I was using additive, it would be completely gone. So, and that is, as I said earlier, you want to make something darker, like those bats I mentioned. Combined lighting is a good way to actually make those darker things actually do show up in some cases. So, but we're gonna put that back to purple for the time being, or a different type of purple. That's too purple. I don't like it. Just right. That's that unearthed purple. Okay. So that's the particle color. Particle velocity. So this should make sense, your minimum and your maximum. This is the amount that they're going to be flying out, right, at the rate. So, and this can be also changed still with particle force, as like we were saying with particle motion, but you can't really create paths with them. So it's a singular path that they go on. You can't do curves with them, for instance. So in this case, let's see here. I want to set particle velocity a minimum of 5, a maximum of 1. Is that really what it defaults to? Well, that's terrible. That makes no sense. That should be inverted. Minimum should be 1. And we're going to be stupid and put maximum to 10. So there's a high variance. Pew, 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 pew. Great. Bubbles everywhere. Bubbles for everyone. Look at that. But, you know, our lifetime's still small because we changed our lifetime earlier. So let's bring that particle lifespan from a half back to like 5. All right, there we go. Now we're talking. Particles everywhere. Yeah, bubbles. Yeah. All right. We're being ridiculous, but that's fine. It's good for educational purposes. All right, so that's particle velocity, and you can see that variance that I've created. What goes without saying, if I set both of those to 10, you'd see them at exactly the same rate, but you lose some of that variety that you want. You're also going to notice there's different sizes here. That's because that's also set down here, same place, particle size. Minimum is 0.1, maximum is 1. That's a bit much. See, like that guy, you're not going to be even able to see him. Why even do that? Let's do 0.25, so at least a quarter of a size. Nope, that's still too small. Let's do 0.4. That's better at least. Yeah, so there we go. We don't want dots. That's a waste of space. It's rendering, but it's not actually visible. Okay, particle rotation. This is great. This makes actually a lot of sense when you're doing certain material files that aren't perfectly spherical like this. So let's see here. Well, hey, let's just grab one of my electrical arcs I've made. Alright, so here's an electrical arc I've made. It looks so weird being purple, but we're going to let that slide for a second. See how they're all going the same exact way? As far as like orientation goes of the particle, not direction. This is where you would change that. You'd go to particle rotation, and let's say minimum of 0, and I'm going to do a maximum of 180. And now look at that. Now they're all facing varying ways. Yes, you can set it to 360. Oh, look at that. Can you go higher? You certainly can. You can do whatever you want here and go as crazy as you want. Just know it's not really worth it. In fact, if you do so, you can end up with interesting situations. So I'm just going to put mine to 180 for now. And let's say, for instance, you notice right below it says particle rotation scale. That does the same thing, very similar to how opacity scale works. We controlled it there. Well, particle rotation scale is here as well. So let's see, at this point here, it starts at a value of 1, right? And over here, I'm going to set it to, let's actually just go up nice and even. What value is that? 8? Let's do 8. Yeah, 8 over the course of the lifespan. And that's going to rotate them over time. Ah, look at that. Flying out. Actually, again, I'm creating things that look like bacteria. Once again, I didn't mean to. So yeah, that's particle rotation. That's particle rotation scale. Particle rotation just sets their initial orientation upon spawning. Scale changes them over time. We've already covered particle opacity, but just to set things in motion again, I'm going to lower this just to kind of give you an example here. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. I am back. Alright, particle opacity scale. Obviously, these things are already being phased out over time, right? Yeah, we can see that. Yeah, they're fading out. Good. Alright, particle size. Just like, we've already covered that as well, but guess what? There's a particle size scale. So you know what that means, ladies and gentlemen. Another demonstration. We're going to make them get big over time. It's like Ghostbusters now. Alright. Boom, look at that. Yeah, doing fun things now. This is the fun and magic that happens in the Cinematic Editor. Alright. And then, of course, there's the particle force. So let's go ahead and apply, what did I say earlier, 9.8? A little bit of gravity. Oh, that's the opposite direction. So that's going up because it's a positive value. So we're going to do negative 9.8. Now we're going to be acting more a little bit like gravity. So they are just chucking out of the bin there. You're going to see them. It's gonna. This scene, this level file. You don't have to have it at any point. Here, let me save it before I do this. Scene, clear level, and there I am back in blackness to look at everything, so the level file isn't blocking me. And boy, oh boy, are those going down quite a ways. So I can always change that particle lifetime to cut that short if I want. And additionally, I can change this. If you try to change it right now when it's playing, it won't let you. So go ahead and pause it. I don't want to change the gravity. I think the rate of falling down is great, but I really want them to shoot out further, right? Maybe I do. I'm pretending I do in this moment, so bear with me. We're going to go back to particle test room map. There are very few maps that will work for you, by the way. Hopefully you have Cinematic Tutorial. That's one that can help. It's a little hard to see with the bloom that's in there, but not all the default maps, they'll put you like in a wall, and there's no way to change that. So if you guys don't actually have a level file, like particle test room, let me know. You can make one real quick, or I can just send you it. I don't recall, forgive me, what's in default install anymore. It's been too many years. Alright, so I want them to kind of clear that wall, right? Just for argument's sake, for demonstration's sake. So instead of messing with the particle force and lowering it, because I actually like the rate at which they drop, I'm going to increase their velocity. So the minimum is set to 1. If I increase that up to, say, 4, well, okay, that's not bad. Let's keep it going, though. 7, yeah, that'll probably do it. Alright, let's see what that looks like now. There we go. It's kind of clearing the wall. It's looking a little better, but you know what? I kind of want an arc. I don't really like how they're just going straight out. It looks unnatural. So we're going to change the pitch here. Let's give it negative 45. That's a bit much, actually. Let's go negative 30. There we go. So they're kind of faced upward, the cone angle. Let's try it now. Oh boy. What have I done? Why is it going backwards? I've done something. Huh. Okay, so now we're in fun investigatory mode. Some of them are going backwards. Let's narrow that cone angle. Why are they doing that? I know why. So we've changed the pitch angle, right? Guess what that means? That means our particle force isn't the same anymore. That means what we were expecting is no longer the case. Remember how I warned about those values and angles? See how it's bending backwards on itself now? It's considering the Y value to be what's in game world as the Z value now. So we're going to set that to 0. Boom. And we're going to assume that Y, or Z rather, is the new Y. 9.8. Nope. See, it doesn't like negative values now. Now it's going to want a positive value. Yeah, there you go. So now you can obviously see what I'm getting at. This is the madness that you deal with once you've changed an angle. The whole system begins to break down, so to speak. So that's cool, though. I'm glad we got to actually see that for a second. Let's actually go ahead and dampen that quite a bit more. 20. No, that's not good. That's not going nearly enough. 45. Oof. Now we're really putting it on, aren't we? That's kind of chucking it out way too fast. So the force itself is actually taking over, which isn't what I want anymore. Alright, so we're going to play with things for a second here. Yeah, there we go. We're going to mix it between X and Z. Let's do 8. Yeah, so there we go. It's going to give me a little bit more of what I want now. I got that 45-degree angle arc. It's coming out. And then they're naturally going down. Yeah. Particle lifetime's insane. I would never actually do that, but, you know, for the sake of demonstration here, that works out okay. So I'm glad you actually got to see that moment where we had to now change the behaviors due to the pitch change, the angle changes. Okay. So that's particle force. We already got into that. Particle motion stretch, we also already showed you. It looks like I was applying some already. You notice how it does none, though? It's because I'm not using particle motion, so it doesn't really matter. Only in particle motion does the stretch actually apply. Unlike force, which can apply for anything, it just won't be able to accomplish paths like you saw before. Particle velocity scale. I think I mentioned this earlier already, but if you wanted to do, I think I did at least. Yeah, pretty sure I did. In regards to you start up strong and you end low. Velocity scale over here on the curve graph, same thing. We're going to unclick particle scale. We don't need that anymore. Let's just mess with X. Okay. I'm going to put X up. Ooh, look, everything changed on screen. It's going over that way now. And we're going to bring it back down fast. This is where scale matters. So we have our velocity set, and we're saying at time 0, we're going to multiply that by 4.5 roughly, that maximum. But very, very quickly, over the course of how many frames? 7 frames. Not much at all. We're going to floor it right back down to 0.2 of the actual maximum. So it's going to end up being a lot more sane. But the idea is that I'm actually spreading it out, essentially. So a good example of this, let's do it right now, actually. We're gonna kill that pitch. We're going to set, let's see here, we're actually going to put that cone angle to 90 instead of 30. Boom, it's going to take up over everything. Perfectly flat planar, yeah. Okay, let's play that just so you can see what it looks like. They fly everywhere now. It's chaos. Okay. But I really want to show how they move outward. So to do that, I'm actually going to kill this guy. And we're going to start something new. We're going to go ahead and create an emitter. Oh, look how he didn't spawn near there. We're going to set his origin zeroed out, as before. And I'm going to actually make him go up. Screw the pitch issue. And we're going to select different material. Cinematics there, and I think I still have Spark in here somewhere. No, what do I have? Oh, now see, this is why you should actually prepare for a tutorial before you do it, so you're not lost in the sauce like I am right now trying to find a certain type of file. I think it should be in a flare, shouldn't it? Visual effects flare. Oh, hey, you know what? I think this actually might be one of those times where it's in materials effects. Yep, it's definitely going to be in here. Fireball, flame, force field, lens flare. Lens flare isn't what I want, but spec will actually work. Okay, spec. Size is too big, so we're going to chop that way down. 0.2 is a maximum. Now, that's still a bit much. Let's do 0.1, and then the minimum, 0.05. Alright, we're actually going to set it to particle motion. And we're going to do not a loop, but we're going to do a kill emitter lifespan of 1 is fine for now, actually. Emission rate of, we're going to kick it up emission rate to 15. We're going to set it to instant. We're going to keep base color at, let's actually give it a little bit of yellowness. Why not? Over here, move it a little bit. That's something. Okay. Velocity, we're going to kick that velocity up just a little bit. We're going to do, let's see, 3 and 5. Okay. No particle rotation, because it's already spherical. Let's see what particle motion looks like when I give it a little bit of stretch. Oh yeah, there we go. Let's give it 5 stretch. Let's go crazier. Let's do 15 stretch. That looks ridiculous. I love it. Nah, we should go 8. Alright, let's take our size way down even further. There we go. So this isn't the ideal thing I would use for a spark, but it is a material file that we can use right now anyways. There is better ones, I just don't know where they are right now. It's why, you prepare instead of doing what I'm doing. So it's just yellow. There we go. Alright, so they're real slow right now. That's real boring. Let's get it to, let's come out with a little bit more oomph. Let's come out with 5 and 10. Alright, let's see how that looks now. Boom, boom, boom. That's a little bit better. Still not having the ferocity that I want. We're going to go 7 and 15. That's better. Let's cut that lifetime down. I'm going to do 0.7. Nope, that's not enough. 0.5. Nope, not enough. 0.35. There you go. Alright, and we're going to give a downward force here. Not enough downward force. Let's apply a lot more than that. Because our velocity is too high, so we need to get more force. Let's do negative 30. There we go, it's better. Man, we're going to have to really jack that up. Let's go 60 then. There we go. It starts going out at all angles. Let's go even higher. There we go. But we've gone a little bit too much, haven't we? Oh, yeah. Okay. So, the y vector, the y-axis, no longer applies. It's probably in Z. You can keep this one paused to actually play with it now. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, so because I changed the pitch earlier, like I said, the axis was changed. So that's a little bit better. It's not ideal, obviously, but it's better. It's actually something that resembles at least some sparks. Okay, and the whole reason I was actually doing this originally, setting this up, is because I wanted to demonstrate... Oh, look, I violated my own rule. Emitter. Spark. There we go. Save. Okay, I wanted to demonstrate velocity. So this has a amount that it sprays out, and that's all well and good, but it's not really, not really what I want. Let's say I want them to actually go upward, and I want them to have a wider reach, just for the sake of argument here. So we're actually going to undo. I got carried away, so excuse me. On particle force, we're not going to use any particle force. This is great, but I actually need them to not go out at a perfect cone angle. I want them to come out and then go straight up. And the way we're going to accomplish that is we're actually going to, let's see here, we're going to go to our X and Y and Z, and you'll notice these colors change because they're all overlapping each other. So blue, green, red. We're actually going to change our X and Z and hope that, we're going to start with X. And we're going to hope that they're not inverted because that pitch again, that pitch issue. So we're going to start up high. Let's see what the value is that. That's 4. Let's go a little higher to make our point. We're going to go roughly 11 times. There we go. And sharp drop off. Actually, we're going to let it ride just for a second before we cut it down to half. So this is the velocity. The particle velocity is what I'm doing, by the way, just so you all know right now. So again, same thing for the z-axis. I'm going to bring it all the way up to roughly 11-ish. We don't have to be accurate right now because we're making a point. Down to roughly half. Okay, let's see how that looks. Yeah, All right. Okay, so one thing I forgot about here, our velocity no longer needs to be as high because we have changed things now. 4 and 10, let's see what that looks like. That's still ridiculous. 2 and 5. There we go, it's a little bit better. And our particle lifespan needs to be increased. So let's do 4 now, so we can actually see what's going on. There we go. So this isn't exactly right, and the reason why it's not exactly right is because the time it's actually taking for it to slow down is taking too long. So I would take this, I'd bring it in, and you can see the particles actually changing on screen. I'd bring it in a little bit, there we go, to something desirable. I do the same thing on the x-axis, right about there. And by the way, that little gadget down there, align yourself so that you know if you see that blue arrow facing to the left or the right, that what you're adjusting is the z-axis, because that's what's visible. And if you rotate around and you see the red arrow facing perpendicular, away from you, then you know that you can more easily see the x-axis. So in this case, for instance, I'm modifying the x-axis. Look at that. You can see it a lot easier. So align yourself to those kind of angles when you're doing this kind of work, so it makes life a lot easier. So there, I'm actually comfortable with that, just outside that general area. So they're going to spread out real fast, and then they're going to go up. Look at that. But you know what? I don't want it to be visible. Those first few frames where it's coming in like that and bursting out, I don't want you to see them. It looks kind of dopey being able to see sparks move outward on end. Like, what sparks do that? So we're going to do what we talked about earlier. We're going to set an opacity scale. So the point of me showing you here all of this was I want you, and look at that, case in point. It's time to go back to particle opacity. There it is. 0. Beautiful. Now I have value to work with. I wanted to be able to show you how you can utilize velocity scale. It can be used for tricks like that. And there's a lot of different ways you can use velocity scale and create little clever tricks. I can't possibly go over all of them right now, but it's something. Oh man, don't do this, by the way. This drives me nuts. I ended on a value of 0.02 right there. Negative 0.02. That's not actually that's not going to make it fade out. You think it will, but it won't. In fact, it'll create lots of little bugs later on in a longer cinematic where they just pops into existence for one frame, and you'll wonder why. Always make sure you set your opacity to 0, golden rule. Okay, so how long is our particle lifespan for? 4 seconds. Okay, and what is this set for currently? Is that time 4? All right, so we're actually going to go roughly right around there, 120. We're going to make this fade out before. Right there. Perfect. So it fades out when the lifespan ends. So there we go. Is that good enough for us? No, it's not. I want it a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delay this. Shift. I'm going to select both of them and use the Shift key to bring it forward a few frames so that you don't see that beginning as much. There we go. That's more of what I wanted. All right. So I think this kind of explains some of the basics. The very last thing I'm going to show you, and I'm going to call it for now. By the way, don't click on all of these things. Don't create a bunch of them and click on them and try to move them. You will crash. I'm just going to save it right now, just because I said the dangerous C word. Once you've done this, let's say, for instance, in this cinematic, I want something else. Like, this is okay to have this, but I want something else to go in there. Like, I've already made a separate cinematic somewhere, or I want this timed differently. Let's say because base time won't work for me, I want something at frame 60, right? So here's what you do. You have multiple options. You can select this option, you can select this particular object, right? Or you can create yourself a new emitter. You can have all these different things you can do. Here's my favorite thing to do, just to show you. You don't have to do this, but it's my favorite. I'm going to move stuff out of the way for a second. I'm going to select an actor, create actor. I'm going to position him in the world where I want. By the way, this is the move. I didn't even talk about this earlier. This is the move. This is how you move your widgets around. You can select here or select the individual axis. Obviously, I really hope this doesn't require explanation. This should be something that is known. Rotate, same thing. You can select these different axes to move. But this is stuff you should know this. There's basics for any modeling program or any real 3D program. Anyways, I want this at 0. You know what? Yeah, so I want this at 0, almost 0. I want it right above. So we're going to put it actually at a point of 1, height of 1. Is that good? Yeah, that's pretty good. Let's see, and where are we here? This comes out? Yeah, but I wanted at frame 60, right? Let's go a little bit earlier, actually, so it makes a little bit more sense thematically. Let's do 24. All right, so that's an empty actor. An empty actor, you can do a lot of things. You can go ahead and open up a model of any kind. I can just pop a model in there, a prop. If I want, I can open up and put a marine in there. It doesn't matter. Or you can do what I love to do, is use empty actors as vessels for cinematics that are timed and created elsewhere for less work later on. Fancy way of saying, go ahead and put that actor where you want it, keep it blank, find the actual time frame, timestamp you want it at, position it right in the world, and then click this little clipboard blue button here in the events area. Click that, and now you can play attached sound. That means sound will follow it. Play static sound, which means it'll just play generally and come from everywhere at once. Don't recommend that one. Attached sound is a newer feature that's done recently as a favor for me, and it's very nice to have. Plain animation, if it were a model I was attaching here to this thing, I would definitely maybe want that. But in our case, I'm playing a cinematic. So, and you can do this already if it was a model. You can have a model that plays a cinematic. That happens quite a lot, actually. But I'm just going to play a cinematic just to kind of show what to do here. Let's go to Cinematics, Environment, Mineshaft, and I recently created an explosion effect for Crusher. There we go. So now, if I go to the frame before it, it doesn't exist. But this frame, it does. So, it has the little physics objects down there. Ignore those. You saw nothing. So, that's that. It plays, and it's done. That's that. I just put a cinematic inside of a cinematic. You can do that for a lot of use cases. An example here is, you can notice how it's a little blue bar down there in that frame. You can always go back to that exact frame. There you go. Select it, kill it, etc. For the sake of argument, I'm just going to very quickly show you another use for it, and that is the thing we were using earlier, tram. Nope, I don't want to save that. My tutorial is over. So for tram here, a little menu I was making, I have, let's get this up. I have a tram object that comes flying around the corner at some point. Whee! But everything that you see, oh, come back. There we go. Everything you see here on this little particular tram model isn't actually in the scene. The only thing that's actually here is the model itself. The Marines aren't there. Ignore their position, by the way. They when things are paused, they do weird things, really weird things. The lights that you see that are being cast in the environment aren't here actually in the scene. The boxes in the back, their animations, the light on his face, none of that is actually in here. That's all child cinematics. That's how it's able to actually track so smoothly in the scene, why they aren't, flailing about. Because if I were to grab this object and try to make it match this object at the same time, their velocity and origin in the world, I would go insane. Trying to match things up like that is sometimes an effort in futility. So, in this case, what I'm using is a tram, and I'm setting a cinematic at frame 0 or frame 1? Frame 1 because it's just a smart move. Sometimes setting things on frame 0 when they're child cinematics, they don't work. So I always like to put them on frame 1. Play animation idle. Oh, I selected the Robo Factory. Duh. There's tram. Alright, so it looks like frame. You can see the blue ones. Red is other things. Those are motion, keyframe motion that they have. So where's that blue frame in here? There's a lot of frames. There it is. So it's opening up. Tram lights cinematic. Underneath tram. That's what I've made. Okay, so you can see that little blue dot on that frame scrubber. On the right-hand side says events, play cinematic, and that's the cinematic. You can change that. You can even put it to an attach point. That's very useful sometimes. Such as if you, well, actually I'll show you at a later one. So a later point in this video, I have a singular Marine come in with a piece of cargo, okay, and then a Mac comes in, right? And this Mac flies through the scene, and he's got these little jets on him. You can't actually select him. He's not in this scene. He's a child cinematic that is attached to this object here. This object is the tram. But if I move the tram about, everything else moves with it, including, you'll notice, that Mac. So, you can have attach points, as I was saying. In this case, it doesn't work right now because I paused it in a weird way, but those little things actually go to the jets. Why does it look so weird? It isn't in motion. Yeah, weird how they got aligned weird. But so those are a jet cinematic that are actually attach point. An attach point is a place on a model specifically that's defined in that model. So in this case, all I've done is I've said this model has a pre-existing attach points, and I just told it to play the cinematic editor to create those little jets. But this whole thing right here is actually a separate cinematic. So what we're going to do is we're going to open that real quick just to show you. No, I do not want to change. NS2 effects. I think it's near the top. Tram menu. Tram lights. Let's do the tram marine. Well, let's do the tram loading one. This is the one with the Mac I was talking about, anyways. All right. So normally I would have this hidden. Oh yeah, fun bug time. See how there's two? That's not selectable. This is a glitch. You got a light over there. This is a glitch. That Mac shouldn't be there. It's not selectable. So we just encountered a fun time. We're going to shut it all down and restart. Tram loading. And ta-da, look at that. It's all gone now. Nice and clean environment. Okay, so normally if you're going to use a child cinematic and you have a reference model, so I need to know where to place these lights that I have here, right? These are just lights that I've set. On the right-hand side, they have properties. You can mess with that to get the effects you want. And I've placed them specifically in front of the lights. But to know where they go on the actual model, you want your model to be at 0, 0, 0. So I've added an actor, right? And I've added a model. In this case, it is a tram car model. And it's perfectly scaled 1 to 1, 1. So that I know when everything will match, essentially. So it's just a reference. You don't actually want this. When you save this file, you're going to save it like this. Because in the original file, you're spawning a tram already. It's already got a model. You don't want to spawn a child cinematic that contains the same model. So you're going to keep it empty like this. Now I've got a marine here posing an animation, a little blue light on his face from a computer screen. Cargo that's sitting on top of that tram. And these are actually little empty actors that are actually playing their own cinematics. In this case, I'm playing a spark cinematic. So they're actually shooting out sparks, as you can see, better looking sparks than we made earlier, at different times. So as the tram comes down the track, it shoots out lights with little sparks. And the idea being that this is attached, the whole scene is attached, so everything works smoothly. I don't have to do much with it. Here comes that Mac, right? So this takes a little bit of trial and error if you're going to go far out of a scene, far out of the way of an individual object. Because, you know, I had to know where to put that Mac. I had to know that there was a door immediately to that side. I had to know that when that Mac comes into the scene, he has to be at a slightly higher height in that level file. So here he is coming in, and you'll notice he comes in at a little bit higher angle and dips down. I pitch him downward first and then come in. He sways a little bit and picks up the box. So the whole thing is seamless, and the idea is, the cinematic itself here is only about 700 frames. But it's it's a child cinematic. So I have child cinematics, such as these sparks, inside of the child cinematic, which is this here, inside another child cinematic, which is like, for instance, I'm going to select this model here, the Mac. He has his own child cinematics attached on him as well, which is those jets I was talking about earlier. There they are right there, the jets. So he doesn't have jets to start with. Takes a second to get there. We're going to go unlit so you can see. He has no sparks, no jets. But in the next frame, he's got, yay, those child cinematics are applied to him. So the idea here is child cinematics upon child cinematics. They make a lot of sense. They make sense for tracking. They make sense for just making your life easier in a lot of cases. I use them all the time. And you can nest lots of them within each other. And it just makes sense. It makes sense if you want to have things start at a certain time. Because if I had the original menu, to have this stuff all coordinated from scratch in the menu without external child cinematic events would be an absolute nightmare. And in some cases, actually impossible. If I wanted to have an explosion at 700 frames in on a menu, I can't do that. I can't tell any emitter, wait for 700 frames, please, before you begin playing. I can't do that. I can tell it to not be rendered. I can tell it to not be visible. But when it comes into view, it's been playing for 700 frames already. So I don't know where along that line. It may not match up. It may not be perfect. So that is where child cinematics come in handy, and they can save you a lot of headaches. There's other stuff that we didn't get into today, like creating the camera, which is hopefully simple but dangerous, like I told you. Then creating the difference between point light and normal light, getting to different types of actors, creating decals, setting up, we did talk about setting up a level, but there are some other stuff I didn't go into, but I hope this is like the core basics that can actually get you started. there's some essentials that you can go into, but a lot of stuff is just like animation stuff, right? Like, you know, before you have a model go downward, have them pitch downward first. So you can actually see right there. So they pitch, and then they actually start to go down. Those subtle differences in movement sometimes, that's animation stuff. You'll learn that stuff on your own or another class or something. But hopefully just talking about the Cinematic Editor in general today has been helpful to you. I hope this recording actually completes on its own and my farmland internet can upload it. And hopefully you guys got something out of this. In the future, if you'd like, I can do some more advanced stuff. Here's something I just made today, for instance. It's quite a trick, this little thing. Some custom assets. But yeah, if you guys have any direct questions, please do actually ask them, and I'll try to help. I know that this program has always been elusive, and it took me many years to figure out its ins and its outs and how it works and how you can do little cute tricks with it. And that's where you get the real magic, is when you get to actually stretch it to its limits, I think. But if you have specific questions, please feel free to ask. And if you know of a topic you'd like me to go into for next time, like creating more advanced effect, I can definitely do that too. That's all I got for now. Thank you so much.